The games you love, how confident are you that you will be able to play them in 10 years?
Ooh?
Depending on how old you are, if you want to go back and play the games from your childhood, you can go a couple different ways. If you're a 90s kid and grew up with the Super Nintendo or PlayStation, you already know how things end. You might still have those old games and consoles and you play them from time to time, or maybe if the games that you liked became popular enough, they'd get re-released in modern platforms. Chrono Trigger's on Steam, there's all the Mega Man Legacy collections, and we have the Nintendo Switch Online stuff nowadays, so it's not like there's no way of playing old games through official means. So yeah, segment's over, remember to like and okay, let's be real. Official preservation 9 out of 10 times falls flat when compared to fan works. Is that necessarily a bad thing? It depends. Long story short, most modern releases of retro games are functional, but with some room for improvement. But fans know how to preserve games, because they know how they want to play them. Let's start strong. Bloodborne, the fan-favorite FromSoft game with a cool Victorian aesthetic and Lovecraftian horror, the game that runs terribly on native hardware, the game that has not been ported to anything since its release in 2015. Did you know that Bloodborne has been fully playable on PC as early as last year? The game was incredibly ambitious for its time, showcasing impressive cloak physics, detailed environments, and a gothic style that was a welcome departure from the medieval fantasy that both Demon and Dark Souls showed. It was a graphical showcase for the PS4. Dark Souls 2 isn't a looker, but it's still impressive how much better Bloodborne looked just 1 year later. Dark Souls 2 had a similar release strategy to games like The Phantom Pain or Titanfall, being cross-generation releases, the older consoles running the game at a lower frame rate and resolution than the newer ones. Bloodborne seems to come from an alternate dimension where the developers fucked up and only released the last-gen version, a next-generation game built from the ground up exclusively for the PS4, and even then it suffered from massive performance issues. The game struggles to reach its goal of 30 FPS, a lot of the time dipping below 25, and to add insult to injury, the frame pacing of the game was broken to the point of stuttering, an issue that the developers had ample time to alleviate. From Software did not make a patch for PS4 Pro support, and PS5 backwards compatibility offered identical performance to a base PS4. And while Sony seemed content with leaving Bloodborne aside, the fans never stopped trying to polish it. In 2021, a fan released a patch that would allow the game to be played at 60 FPS on a PlayStation 4 Pro. Similarly, you could jailbreak a PS5 to run the game at 60 FPS, but the PS5 fix was patched out by Sony quickly after, and in January of 2025, almost 4 years after its creation, Sony issued a DMCA to the PS4 Pro mod. Why? This is still the highest rated From Software game ever made, with a huge fanbase eager to play and spend money on it. Fans have been adamantly asking for a PC port since the game released more than a decade ago, but Sony seems to either not notice or care. Game director Hidetaka Miyazaki has gone on record saying he wants the game on PC, but it seems like Sony hasn't shown interest in making a port. The Bloodborne IP is a Sony property and only they decide what to do with it. So anyway, you can now play Bloodborne from start to finish with your controller of choice in whatever resolution you like, provided you have the horsepower, at stable 30 or even 60 frames per second thanks to the Shad PS4 emulator. Here's your legal reminder that emulation is legal and protected. As long as you dump your own games that you legally own, you cannot be charged with any wrongdoings. That being said, what are the results like? To put it simply, it's playable, but not perfect. Running on a Ryzen 3500X and an RTX 3060, the game can manage a semi-stable 30 FPS at 1080p. It can be patched to run at 30 FPS, and it looks great at this frame rate, but making it run at higher resolutions will make the stutters more common and noticeable, and for some reason when I tried to use the 60 FPS patch to record footage, it wouldn't work, so you'll have to take my word for it. The frame rate can be very inconsistent, however, as the shaders compile, this should become less of an issue over time. To boost performance, I recommend installing some sort of FPS boost mod. These will remove some lighting effects, it's noticeable, especially on character faces which adopt a wax doll sort of look, but FromSoft games never really had the best faces, and the game still looks great regardless. And if you want to play the Hunter's Nightmare DLC, you will need a patch that forces to be activated. With these fixes, you get an experience that is better than what you can get through any official means as of the publishing of this video. It's not perfect, but let's compare it to what Sony offers. With Sony, you buy a decade-old game for your decade-old console and suffer terrible performance, but don't have to worry about any setup or troubleshooting. With emulation, you get the game running at 60 FPS and upscale it to whatever resolution you'd like, use whatever controller you like, even mouse and keyboard, plus faster loading times. But you do need to spend a few hours downloading patch mods and troubleshooting. You may also experience some crashing. I don't believe the emulator is yet at a point where you can unambiguously call it a better experience, especially with how often you are bound to find issues that require a restart or flat out make the game crash. But with updates making the experience better by the day, it doesn't have very long to go before it becomes a definitive way to play it. However, at this time, I would only recommend it to people who enjoy the setup process or are willing to power through it and the fixes to play a better version of the game. I will never stop saying it. Emulation is awesome. It's an amazing solution that keeps history accessible, because game consoles have hundreds, if not thousands of titles that porting them all to PC would be an impossible task. Or so we thought. Fan ports to PC used to work via decompilation, which is the process of manually reverse engineering the source code of a game to get a readable code. Decompilation itself does not yield a playable game, but it gives people the tools to make that port. Once the decompilation is finished, it is usually a separate team that does the porting job. Recent developments in that front include Ship of Hyrcanian's Ocarina of Time and the popular port of Super Mario 64 for the PC. And also for the Nintendo Switch, which by the way happened before the 3D All-Stars version was even out, which uses emulation, so fans had Super Mario 64 running natively on Nintendo's own hardware before Nintendo themselves, and unlike the official port, this one has analog camera, high frame rates, a plethora of customization options, and widescreen. Decompilations are an incredible development for preservation, which also open up the floodgates for things like mods, HD texture packs, and a whole lot of fan enhancements. Sonic Unleashed 2 got the decompile treatment recently, finally releasing this mediocre gem from the clutches of the PS3. But as amazing as these fan projects are, they come with a caveat I did mention earlier. They require months, if not years of hard work just to port one game, which basically means that only the very popular releases will ever get this treatment, leaving the rest of a console's library to rot. Until now. Because recently the duo known as Dario and Wiseguy just potentially solved that issue entirely. Introducing recompilation. Contrary to decompilation, this one is an automated process, using a program that creates a playable port from a ROM. Now, it isn't perfect just yet, and most of the playable examples are the ones that did get a lot of manual work to get them to work just right, but the potential here is insane. Basically every Nintendo 64 game is eventually going to be natively playable on PC, even the shit ones, and most importantly, even the non-popular ones. Chameleon Twist fans can rest easy knowing that their favorite obscure platformer will eventually be playable on PC, just like Gabe Newell intended. But a game being playable on PC doesn't mean that the fans will leave it at that, because if you know one thing about official PC versions of third-party releases, is that they can be really, really bad, especially with 7th gen games. Basically every Bethesda game on Steam requires a bunch of fan mods to get it to work properly, and this is just talking about getting the game to not shit itself every 5 seconds. But mere optimizations are not good enough. How about restoring a botched port to its former glory and enhancing it beyond what the developers intended? The original Silent Hill 2 did get a PC port. Can you buy it now? Nope. But even if you did, it may not be the HD collection, but damn, missing effects, bad audio, different voice actors, missing textures, amongst many other issues, this is not a good version of Silent Hill 2. But some fan work later, and this is hands down the definitive way to play Silent Hill 2. 60 FPS, widescreen support, high resolution, upscale textures and cutscenes, and basically all of the issues that the official port had don't exist anymore. And if you really want to, you can switch from the bird's eye view to a more traditional over-the-shoulder camera. On one hand, it does kinda take away some of the visual identity of the game. On the other hand, the fixed camera in Silent Hill 2 is not really fixed and really loves to wobble around randomly and blind your vision, but what do I know, I only played the game. Companies are not your friends. They will restrict access to your favorite games if they feel it's convenient, because corporations do not exist to provide a good service. They exist to always make a bigger profit. That is why Nintendo is selling Mario Kart World at $80. That is why Mother 3 will never be localized. And that's why massive layoffs after successful releases happen. I'm telling you this because there are a considerable amount of games that you simply can't buy anymore. The previously mentioned PC port of Silent Hill 2 is not for sale anywhere. That game you guys really wanted me to talk about, and I did talk about it before, and I talked about it again in another video, but you guys don't seem to mention that you asked me to do it, and I did it anyway! Spec Ops: The Line. It's been delisted for a long time now. The only way I was able to play it is because it's been archived on the internet. If you know, you know. Remember Infinity Blade? I do, and I used to love these games. I spent so many hours playing and replaying them in my old iPhone 4. But in 2018, support for those games was removed entirely, and you just can't play them anymore. I hate mobile gaming as much as the next guy, but these were games that came from a different time, where this was a new exciting medium and many titles were experimenting on how to better take advantage of it. They were ambitious in their scale, storytelling, and graphics, and now they are simply lost forever. Except they're not, because they too now received fan ports to PC thanks to... I actually don't know. Some anonymous group of fans shadow dropped the first game, and a while later, the second one, so it's more than likely we're getting the third game as well, making sure that these landmark titles, because that's what they are, remain playable in the future. Gaming might just be the most complicated medium to preserve. File sizes are big, and physical media really loves to self-destruct over time. But whereas with movies and books you can just have them on a hard drive and access them without much issue, games require specific conditions to be played. If not original hardware, then the correct operating system, or up-to-date drivers, and who knows what else. And while I did say that corporations are not your friends, a lot of the time the reason why their releases are not as good as fan works is not because they're evil or greedy, even though they are. It might just not be profitable to dedicate that time and money to enhance their older games to this degree, and the investors are not gonna like that, which is why fans always have the advantage. Because even if it takes way longer to finish these passion projects by people on their spare time, those people don't have to worry about things like deadlines or budgets. Just make sure the project is the best it can be, so the history of the medium can be properly preserved. And I for one, am very glad that said history is in their hands.